go. Okay, well, welcome everybody, both in person and on Zoom. Thanks for joining us this morning for our webinar titled The Great Small Business Plateau. We're excited to see you all today. The Chamber has a library of small business seminar series events that have been recorded, and they're accessible for free on our website, which is centralmarylandchamber.org. And while you're on our website, you can go ahead and register for our newsletter and follow us on social media so you can learn more about our upcoming events. So if our guests on Zoom could go ahead and add your contact information in the chat box, following the event, we will share that with everyone who joined us today. And if you have questions throughout the program, you can go ahead and add those in the chat box as well. Our staff are monitoring that and can ask questions live. We'll also have time for Q&A at the end of the event. So now we're going to take a quick moment to do very brief introductions. I'm going to call on each person on the Zoom, and then Patrick will go around the room and ask everyone to introduce themselves. But due to limited time, if you could just let us know your name, your title, and your business name, that would be great. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, let's see, Stephanie, are you available?
I am. Oh wait, there's more than one. Two. Hey, I know that voice. I know that voice.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Stephanie on the Zoom. Stephanie Gething.
Okay. Hey everybody, it's Stephanie Gething, All American Intelligence Solutions. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Stephanie. Next up is Mike.
Good morning, everyone. Mike Camarada, certified financial planner and partner at Tie Creek Financial Group, as well as the chair of the board for this awesome chamber.
Thanks for joining us, Mike. Good to see you. Next is Beth. Good morning, Beth. Beth Cool, are you available?
Sorry, it's Beth Cool with What's Up Media.
Great. Good morning, Beth. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's see. Now, Christy Muma, do you have audio yet? If not, that's okay. It looks like no. So I'll just say Christy Muma's here with Stewart Technologies. Then Mitch Rahm.
Hey guys, Mitch Rahm with Dr. Backup, managing partner.
Good morning, Mitch.
Hey.
Okay, and then Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Most definitely. Hello, everybody. It's Adam Pohl, the new director of membership here with the Chamber. So happy to see everybody.
Hey, Adam. Okay, next we'll go over to Henry. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning. Henry Kornblatt with Capstar Commercial Realty, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Olivia, you want to say hello?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Olivia. I'm the communications manager here with the Chamber.
Okay.
Bless you.
Thank you. Going through to see if I got everybody. And then there's me, Christy Simon, President and CEO with the Central Maryland Chamber. And then now I'm going to turn it over to you, Patrick, so you can have the folks in the room introduce themselves.
Okay, we'll start on my left.
Rob Beasley, Systech Networks.
I am Stephanie Gary, CEO of KG Truck and Auto.
And
I am Hazel Demand J, Precise Expression, LLC.
nice to have you all here.
Okay, is that everybody?
That is everybody.
Okay, so next up, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's presentation. Patrick Lee, author of The Great Small Business Plateau and How to Blast Past It, is a serial entrepreneur and Main Street business guru who believes in the power of Main Street as a leading force in the American economy. He's the president of the Chesapeake think tank, where he works with small business owners to achieve their loftiest dreams. Patrick has over 20 years of experience owning and operating small businesses. He's been involved in every aspect from the startup phase to successfully selling a business and everything in between. He's a University of Notre Dame of Maryland graduate with a Master's of Arts in Management with concentrations in corporate management and business communications. His entrepreneurial inspirations come when he's hiking the mountains in Western Maryland and West Virginia. So thanks for joining us today, Patrick. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for having me. So today we are here to talk about the Great Small Business Plateau. And if you all attended, you have to be curious, right? Like, what are we talking about? So let me first take care of one little bit of information. I was introduced as president of Chesapeake think tank, which I am. But the slide you see up there is the Spark Business Institute, which is a second company that I run. The stuff that we're talking about is trademarked under the Spark Business Institute. So you're going to see the slides with the Spark Business Institute, but Chesapeake Think Tank is a member of the chamber, proud to be one, and so don't mix the two up. It's just me, okay? All right. So let's talk about small business, and let's talk about some of the frustration that small business owners frequently end up in, right? Because we all start as a small business owner with the intent that we're going to create a grand thing, right? We're going to control our own schedule. We're going to make this all work. It's going to be peachy, my favorite word. And frequently what happens is that we end up in some painful spots, right? We end up where we're not sure, number one, that we're controlling our own schedule. Number two, the success that we experience to get up and running sometimes feels hard to maintain. And we also feel sometimes like, why aren't we moving along a path towards our vision, right? Like it's like we got stuck somewhere along the line and we can't quite figure out why. So that's why we've come up with the Great Small Business Plateau. So let's start with this. Let's jump ahead here. Now it's going to decide not to work.
Of course. There it went.
That just, okay. So let's just do a couple shows of hands online. You can just type it in the chat box, yes, or leave it blank. But I know some folks here are here and they're in a position of leadership for a company, but they don't necessarily own it. So I'm actually curious, how many folks here are business owners? All three in the room?
Hard to tell the other one. Let's see.
Okay.
So pretty good percentage of business owners.
Okay. And by show of hands, how many of you are completely satisfied with the state of your business right now? And be honest. We got a yes over here. How many online?
Like anybody online has their hand raised.
Okay. All right. One last set of questions here as we get going. How many folks, by show of hand again, do you consider yourself a growth business? Okay, we got 2 here. We got 3 here.
Couple online saying yeah.
Okay. How many of you consider yourselves a lifestyle business?
What do you mean by lifestyle?
Aha. Good question. All right. So did we have,
Brownie points. Hold on, I'm looking to
see if there's,
I don't see anybody who claims lifestyle.
okay, so let's talk about this, because this is one of those key moments of identification when you're deciding what your business is going to be, that becomes part of the frustration that we face. And that is that everybody has been taught to say they're a growth business, right? If you're not growing, you're dying. We've all heard that, right? You must be a growth business. But a lifestyle business actually has components of growth in it, and it's something that we all tend to end up being and don't recognize. So here's what a growth business is. A growth business is a consistent and constant level of high growth, meaning you're growing by 20%, 25%, 50%. You are changing up your infrastructure, you are adding personnel, you are constantly doing things to keep the business growing at an aggressive rate. It doesn't mean that you're getting a few new clients here and there, that you're still advertising, that you're chasing new business. That's not the definition of a growth business. A growth business means sometimes exponential numbers, constant fueling of a constant movement of your business's revenue to higher levels. Lifestyle business means that as a business owner, you reach a level at which you are comfortable. Okay? You're comfortable there. You're making as much money as you need to make. You've got money in the bank. Your business is doing fine. You're paying your employees. The benefits are good. Yes, you are adding clients here or there, because remember, some clients are going to leave, some clients are going to come on. We're maintaining a profit positive business at a certain level, and you'll bounce a little bit on that. You'll grow a little bit up, you'll drop a little bit down, you go back up, but we're not shooting the moon constantly. We're not constantly reinventing, and fueling growth. Does that make sense? Okay. Having said that, how many folks want to change their vote? How many folks now want to say that they're actually a lifestyle business? One here. I see a couple online. Okay. So a few. All right. So let's see if this is working. So this, nope, doesn't want to do it. So you get to be,
Okay, I'll be the.
all right. So let's talk about how everyone got where they got, and then we'll jump into this a little bit more. So here's essentially what happens when you become a small business owner, right? You either have an idea, you have a skill, or you have an opportunity. And this is why you decide, all right, I'm going to hang my own shingle, I'm going to go after this. And by definition, if you're here as a business owner, you had initial success, right? You got some clients, you got some revenue. Now you're in business, it's real. Hopefully you're paying yourself. I know a lot of small businesses that cheat there, but there's initial success. And as that initial success happens, you don't expect it to stop, right? You get those first new clients in, you're doing the same things you were doing. You expect that momentum to continue, all right? And what happens a lot of the time is you'll see a stalled growth. It doesn't continue. You're not sure why. You're doing the same things that got you here. You're following the patterns. You're at the chamber meetings. You're doing your advertising. You're out there doing what you have to do, but growth is stalled. Because of that, you start doing a whole bunch of new initiatives, right? You say, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to try that. We're going to rebrand. We're going to add this product. We're going to do whatever that looks like. But you get sort of mediocre results with those new initiatives. You get a little up, but something else drops. You're constantly just bouncing along here, okay? And it starts to feel like it's harder and harder just to maintain where you are. It actually feels like there's pressure pushing you backwards, okay? And you're like, okay, what's this about? That then leads to frustration with your people, right? You're there and you're like, why aren't they performing at the level I'd like them to, right? And if that stays that way for too long, you start becoming burnt out, okay? And sometimes you start getting bored. Like, why am I doing this? This is no longer interesting, okay? So those are some of the frustrations that we will feel as we go through this. So go ahead, Kim. Okay, so before we jump into this, I'm going to talk for a minute, a little story here, because I think a lot of what happens with small business owners is the skills that the small business owner shows are not always the skills that they need. So let me just give a little example here, because we've all heard what does a small business owner have to be? Well, they have to be resilient, right? They have to be nonstop. Okay, they have to be focused. They have to be intense. And we hear a bunch of these sort of soft skills of how that person needs to approach the business. So I'm going to tell you a story that was told to me by a speaker that we had in who was teaching us about sales. And this speaker was talking about how when he was young, he learned how to be a salesperson through his father, because his father was a door-to-door salesperson, but not residential door-to-door. This particular gentleman was walking the streets of Detroit, going from one drugstore to the next drugstore, and this was in the 60s, late 50s, 60s. And what he was actually selling was little tiny wrapped up packages of powdered aspirin. That's what he sold, okay? And so he would sell them for like 11 cents to the drugstore in whatever quantity they wanted, and then they would sell it for 20 cents or whatever and get their profit. So that's what he did. And sometimes he would come home extremely late. He wouldn't come home at 5, he'd come home at 9 or 10 or whatever. And at one point his son asked him, what are you doing out there that you didn't get home to 10? And he goes, well, son, I have a rule here that is how I operate in business, because he said, I know that if I give myself a break on sales, if I say today I got no sales, but oh well, that's okay, I'm going to go home. He says, if that happens, I know that I'll break that rule then forever. Like, I don't feel like it today. So I have a rule that I can't go home until I've sold something, anything. And so then he tells the story. He goes, one day I was out and it was getting late and the drugstores are all getting ready to close down. I hadn't sold a thing. And I get into one last drugstore with like 10 minutes till they close. And I go to the pharmacist and I say, I'm selling this. And he goes, we're stocked fine. We don't need anything today. And he goes, can you please just buy 1 or 2 packets? And the pharmacist goes, you need 22 cents that badly, right? And he goes, no, I have a rule. If I don't sell anything, I can't go home. And I really want to go home tonight. So the pharmacist says, okay, give me 2 packets. Here's 22 cents. Go home, right? So we all hear that, right? And when we're listening to this, our thoughts about this are positive, right? I mean, here's a gentleman who's absolutely looking after his family. He's got a set of principles by which he does his sales and behaves, and it sounds super positive, right? So what I would say is the skill that he's demonstrating there is perseverance, right? And we've all heard perseverance is great for a small business owner. Just persevere, be resilient, be tenacious. But there's another synonym for perseverance, which is stubbornness, okay? So how many of us overdo what it is we think is the secret to getting there? Because when I look at that story, initially I'm just as like, wow, that's impressive. But then I start thinking about it and I'm like, well, couldn't he have, put something on consignment? Couldn't he have gone into a drugstore and say, hey, here's 25 packets. I'll be back next week. If you sell them, I'll collect. If you don't, I'll take them back or resupply you. I mean, couldn't he have been creative versus just willpower stubborn? And would it have gotten better results? And I think we see a lot of that with small business entrepreneurs. So let's look at the actual plateau here. And what you see there is you see first emerging business. This is what we talked about, right? You have an idea, you start the business, you start to pick up clients, things start to happen, money's coming in. You're like, okay, money's coming in. I need to market more. Now I need to hire some help. Your business is beginning to become a business. Next slide, Kim. Oh, there it goes. All right. So by the nature of that, you've got momentum. The business starts shooting upward. Things are starting to happen. Okay. And most small business owners, they don't have a plan for this. They're feeling it. Growth is coming in. There's new clients. They're trying to keep up and all. And the business, like the laws of physics, okay, there is momentum. And unless there is a force applied to that momentum, it's going to continue. So what happens is the business just shoots up and it reaches a certain level. And then all of a sudden, it has trouble going any further. A force is acting on it. We say, well, what's that force? Well, it's okay. What we see there is you see the equilibrium piece. What we call the equilibrium point along this journey of the business is the point at which the business's systems, as they are designed, as they exist, is operating optimally. So whatever set of systems you have, we know that it can handle a certain amount of clients well, right? Cost structure, there's a certain place where the profits are at their best, right? So the equilibrium point is where the business as you've designed it operates at its optimal place. But what frequently happens with small business owners is they never calculate that. They never knew what it was. So that momentum shoots them right by that equilibrium point. And they hit that point where all of a sudden they're feeling this pressure. Why aren't we growing anymore? Why is there pressure pushing us down? Next slide, Kim. Okay, and that's what we call a churn point. And that's the point at which this small business owner has done a number of things to get themselves trapped. And here's what those things typically look like. Okay, I'm feeling this pressure pushing me backwards. I'm not growing anymore. So I'm going to hire some new people. So I hire new people. Okay, or I'm going to buy a new piece of equipment and I'm going to offer a whole new line of revenue. Okay, but these things aren't necessarily, you now have to pay for those things, right? You pay for the personnel, you pay for that piece of equipment, but it's not feeling like it's changing anything. You know, you start to make some money over there and something drops off over here, right? So you got to turn your attention over there. So you see that bouncy line there. And that bouncy line is exactly what happens at this turn point. We're constantly fueling, trying to take off again. Something falls, we drop it, we then refuel. So there's a lot of initiatives. And as we're doing that, by definition, we're beginning to eat up our profits. We're starting to use the money that we got from a successful business and the revenue we're bringing in, and we're starting to churn it because we keep doing a new thing. It doesn't yield the result, and so we start to drop. So this is the small business plateau. This is the place where the business now, as designed, can't get beyond this. So frequently what happens is that owners continually do new initiatives. You know, we're going to rebrand, we're going to do this, we're going to do something. They're trying stuff. And at some point, they reach a point where they go, I don't know what's happening. This isn't working. This is no longer fun. It's no longer profitable. I don't even have that much, sometimes, that much left to spend on this. What's going on? So here's what's going on. This business was designed with certain parameters. And those parameters, we ignored what those systems were capable of doing, and we went past that. But we never reassessed what's needed here. We just kept thinking we can add another couple people, or we just need to work harder, or this is going to get better. But we're straining our systems. So our option is to change those systems to become a growth business. Now, what it looks like here, next slide, there we go, is that to get to where we got to go to invest in the future, we're going to walk across that little small business plateau green line there. It's going to be a straight walk. We're going to say, you know what? I'm going to change my systems. I want to grow, right? So you go about changing your systems, and it's going to be a simple thing. We're going to change it all up. We're going to walk across the line. We're going to grow. But that's not how it works. How it works is this. The moment you introduce change, and you introduce large-scale change to a system, that system faces strain and stress. And remember, we're already at a churn point. We're already feeling that. So you see that red line that dips down to number 4 and then shoots back up? That's what typically happens when people try to get off the great small business plateau. The owner says we're doing it. They jump, and it feels like they went off a cliff. And so they're sliding down. We call it a slingshot effect. So they come down, and if everything is planned properly and benchmarked properly, they're going to slingshot their way up to growth. But on the way down, business owners are going, what did I do? This is the worst decision I've ever made. We're falling apart. I want to go back. I want to go back to where I was. It's a problem. When you open Pandora's box, you can't shut it. As soon as you put change into the system, change is happening. So you cannot go back. And by the way, you don't want to go back to a churn point. A churn point is non-sustainable. At some point, it will eat you up, or it'll eat up your finances. So you have to potentially do that. Okay. Next slide. Okay. One more. Okay. So to get to that growth business, what we end up doing here is we end up setting up where people want to go. We say, okay, here's the vision. This is what you've experienced as a company up to this point. Here's where you want to go now. Let's get a plan to get there. What is the infrastructure we need? How will we finance that? Which, by the way, can be problematic because we've been eating up a lot of our funds and we've been borrowing and doing things because we had all those issues. But how do we do this? What's the plan? We then benchmark that 4 that you see there, and we benchmark it very clearly because one of the things we know is the owner is going to panic. They are going to panic. This is painful. This is scary. I'm losing everything. I don't like the decisions you're making. I wouldn't do that. Right? So we have to benchmark that so they understand going in what's going to take place. They can't just jump and then hope it goes well. And the whole time this is happening, we're saying, remember, you're jumping off a cliff, but you're gonna slingshot. And these benchmarks are here so that you don't just go down and then keep going down, right? Now, that's still very difficult to do. Now, you say, okay, I understand exactly what you're doing there, but I rethought my concept of being a growth business. I'm like, you know, this sounds really, really awful. I don't want to do that. Okay, so okay, you have another option. Another option is you get back to your equilibrium point. Okay, now guess what? There's a tiny bit of a problem here. The equilibrium point sits about an inch down from that great small business plateau green line, that churn point, right? About an inch down on the green line there. And you don't just walk straight down that line. You don't just walk, you know, it's just a level thing. You jump off again. You jump off and you do that same thing. And here's why that happens. Because you've brought on extra infrastructure, extra personnel. You've got debt. You've got other things you took on to stay at the churn point. And because of that, some of the time, the revenue levels you're at that churn point are almost required for you to even pay the bills. So dropping down, shrinking your business and becoming at that equilibrium point is equally hard. I don't want to fire these people. They've been with me for 2 years now. I like them, but you have too much personnel for that equilibrium point. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this piece of equipment. I'm still paying on it. I have a contract. If I'm not using it, right, if I'm not generating that revenue to use it, how do I even pay for it? So once again, once you reach the churn point, you've got a hard decision either way. And so we're not making that decision based on what's more likely to succeed. I mean, that will come into play, but we're asking you, what do you want? Do you want that lifestyle business we talked about in that beginning? Is that where you're going to be comfortable? Because we'll do all the work to get you there. Or do you want that growth because you're not going to be satisfied and we'll do all the work to get the growth? Make sense? Okay. Any questions up to this point? Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay, so now let's talk about inhibitors. Because what we know is this. We know that that cycle repeats consistently. And it's not just for startups, by the way. It happens multiple steps of the way as a business scales and grows. And in fact, when I'm looking at my plans for my businesses, I try to predict what are going to be my plateaus. You know, when is something going to hit that's going to slow me down? And frequently I can get the first two right. Like I'm like, okay, at this point, the number of personnel we have is not going to be able to handle this. So we know we're going to be adding staff, and that means management, and that means systems, right? Next one could be technology. You know, hey, I know at this point we're going to have to upgrade what we're doing with tech. So you can sometimes predict what those are, but not always. Sometimes you don't know what is going to be that plateau. So let's talk about the inhibitors that small business owners typically face. And the first one is called founder's cap. And that means essentially this. You're the problem. Yes, you. So next slide. Here we have a gentleman owner. I selected this photo, number one, because he has a twinkle in his eye. He's still smiling because he's a business owner and he's going places, right? But I also like the fact that you already see his founder's cap. And what a founder's cap is this. You started this thing. You made every decision. You made every strategic decision, tactical decision. You're the one who gets it. You get your business. You've been there from the beginning to now. Every problem, you know it. When we become so sure that for the entirety of this business's life, we're going to be the smartest person in the room, we have founder's cap. We need to be able to see where there is value in other people's knowledge, where there's expertise beyond what we know. And we need to be open-minded to the idea that things can be done differently. It doesn't have to be the way we say. Going back to my story, why are we pinned in this corner? Because we won't turn around. We just keep marching into the corner because, by gosh, my willpower is going to make me walk through that wall. And it doesn't always happen. Okay, so that's number one is founder's cap, which we will come back to a little bit. Let's go to number 2. Okay, number 2 is interesting. Number 2 is the jack of all trades. And what this means is this. In a small business, typically, a couple of partners, maybe one owner, you start your idea, you start your business. At some point, you're hiring staff. And when you're small, you're hiring staff usually based on their ability to do a lot of things. Like, I'm hiring an assistant, but I also want them to do stuff in QuickBooks, and it'd be great if they could be the receptionist also and answer some phones, and it would be nice if they had a good personality to deal with my vendors and any clients that might call on the phone. And so you're hiring for somebody who is a jack of all trades. Like, okay. And once you start that, you don't typically stop. So your second hire becomes a jack of all trades also, because you're like, well, in a small company, we're going to cross-train, right? We've got to cross-train. So you start cross-training, okay? Well, now we're starting to accumulate a whole lot of people who are good at everything, but not great at anything. Next slide. So here's what typically happens. The owner has a certain capacity they can handle, right? A certain amount they do. And what they're saying to themselves is, in order for me to grow, it can't all be on me. I need help. So they'll typically hire an admin. You see the admin there, and you see the admin lifts the owner up just a little bit, adds just a tiny bit of capacity to the owner's ability to do something. We've heard this 100 times. The owner saying, I work 70 hours a week, right? And I can't get to new sales. And without the new sales, I don't have the revenue to do what I want to do. And also, I need help. So here's what they think. They think, I'm going to hire that admin or that support staff. And that support staff is going to free me up to do other things. Now, here's typically what happens. 2 things. Number 1, we forget that when we hire an admin, we add on management to ourselves. So there's extra work that we're generating just by adding the admin. The second thing we do is we think that if the admin frees up 15 hours of our time, that we're going to fill that 15 hours with work. Well, if you're working 70 hours a week and an admin shows up and lets you work 55, do you go and work 70? No. Human nature doesn't do that. Maybe you work 60, maybe you gain 5, but you don't keep running at that pace. And the admin is giving you a limited support. It's still all on you. You're still the smartest person in the room, know everything, going to make all the decisions. They're just there trying to take some headaches off of your plate. Make sense? Okay, next slide. Okay, now, what ends up happening is we end up getting help in a whole bunch of spots, right? We got help in, we have an outsourced IT service, and you see human recourses there. That means we have a recourse for humans, but it's actually supposed to say human resources. So human resources, finance, whatever. These are all areas that we have somebody helping us. So our capacity, our ability has gone up a little bit. Here's how companies truly grow on the personnel side. Next slide. Okay, we go out and we hire some folks who are smarter than we are in these areas. So we go out and we hire somebody on staff, or we outsource and spend the money required, right? So we get experts. So you see here, we got a marketing expert. They're not helping us. They're telling us. They are truly beyond what we know, and their expertise is going to help that company grow. We get a finance person. Every time we add somebody in who is an expert in something, not a jack of all trades, we are truly raising the capacity and potential of our business. It's not capped by us. It's not totally dependent on us being the smartest person in the room. And I learned this the hard way. I remember spending, in my big first successful startup, I knew our computer systems. I knew them well. I knew the software. I knew everything worked. So I would spend, if something went down, I'd spend 4 to 10 hours like sitting at a computer trying to fix this. Okay, there came a point where that didn't work. It shouldn't have worked at all, but there came a point where even I realized, this is kind of silly. I don't have 12 hours to give to figure out what that problem is. Can somebody call somebody? Okay, so we know when that happens, but when we stick to always making sure we're the smartest person in the room, or we're going to make the final decision, even when an expert is telling us something different than we think, we are limiting our company's ability to grow. Okay? All right, next slide. Okay, so here's where we have an expert in every area here. And so the company has hired an expert in every area. We have divisions, and you say, okay, but what's my role, right? As the owner, this is my company, and now I have all these people who are all smarter than me in every area. What is it I'm supposed to be doing? Well, guess what? You're the umbrella there. You're the vision. What the marketing people think in their silo. They don't think across the whole thing. They think in their silo. So do the operations people, so do the finance people. Your job now is to connect all that expertise and make sure that we have a unified vision and that decisions can be made in a rational manner. So you never stop with a role. And if you look at definitions of what CEOs are supposed to do at the big companies, they're supposed to vision. That's their main skill. That's your main skill too, if you build it right. All right, next slide. Okay, so next issue is personnel issues. Okay, and we all faced personnel issues. Go ahead, next slide. Here you see a very happy, very competent staff of people. Okay, they're just jumping up and down to make sure your business is successful. We frequently get stuck in that jack of all trades piece.
I was just checking the chat.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay.
We get stuck in that jack of all trades piece, and that defines our personnel, right? However, saying that we got past that, and now we're dealing with a staff. Morale of staff, culture of staff, those things play a huge, huge role. And you need to start there when hiring staff, when training staff, when acclimating staff, when bringing people on. You need to define that culture. You need to have core values. You need to stick to those. When anybody hires by saying, we just need to fill this hire, who's the best resume? You are doing a disservice to your future. It may work in that moment, but you're disrupting. You always hear that, like, yeah, he's a great player, but he's no good in the locker room. Okay, well, that's about culture. Okay, and that same thing exists with your hiring. We also know of folks who keep somebody around who is toxic to their business, and they will not let them go because it's going to be too much of a pain. It's too hard. I can't do it. They know too much. Okay, well, once again, that may work short term. It will not work long term. So understanding what the culture is we want, hiring based on that, and then maintaining that culture, that is also one of the roles of the owner. Core values are important. They're not just a little gimmick thing we say. They can make or break you actually reaching your vision. I know owners who were successful financially and they hate their businesses. They hate them because this is no longer what I imagine. These people have minds of their own. I don't like working with people I'm working with. I don't like my clients. This thing happens. It's up to you to maintain the vision and the direction. All right, next. Infrastructure. This one is an easy one for folks to picture, right? Like you need to make sure you have what it takes to get the job done. And infrastructure is a tricky thing because small business owners typically have just the amount of infrastructure they need to deal with the business they have at hand. They rarely have planned what does my infrastructure need to be for where we're going. And so when it comes time to make a jump, it's a huge risk because this wasn't laid out. We haven't accumulated. We haven't done this in this orderly manner. It's like, okay, now we have pressure. These clients want this. These clients want that. I need this. And so we're making decisions reactively, not based on growth. Next slide. So one of the things that typically happens is either we're chasing infrastructure, right? Do we have enough money to get that? You know, can we leverage to get that piece of equipment? Can I actually hire people and afford it? We're chasing. But there's a couple of interesting stories that demonstrate the other direction. And that's where the owner bets everything on their infrastructure in a certain way, and it doesn't work out that way. One of the first consulting jobs I ever had was I was brought into a masonry accessories company, and they had a patented product that was making them a ton of money. The owner of this company had seen this problem because he actually owned masonry restoration crews and stuff. He saw the problem firsthand. He went down in his basement and he invented the solution to it, got it patented, opened up this company. It worked really wonderfully. So voila, he's got a very successful business. Now, as this business is growing, this owner, part of his motivations were he liked being the inventor. He liked being the one who fixed things. So he went looking for a problem to go back in his basement and create another hit, right? So he found that some of the issues that he faced with brick construction that also theoretically existed with block construction. So he went in his basement and he invented a totally new thing that would fix this issue with block construction also. Okay, so he patents it, he releases it, he decides he's going to own the means of production. So he buys $100,000 piece of equipment, the people to run it, buys a place to put it, is all set to sell. And he expected that the West Coast of the United States, because there's a lot of block construction there, is going to buy this thing like mad. They don't. They buy none of it. It does not perform the same way the other one did. So that's when I get brought in. And my first thing was, why isn't this working? What are we doing wrong with our marketing? What are we doing wrong with our sales? Why isn't this working? I said, well, here's the thing. I got to do some research. Let me see what I can figure out. So I go and I start looking, and I discover a couple things. Number one, this was a mold prevention, moisture mitigating piece of supply. I don't even know what to call it. And there's a couple things about the West Coast that you need to take into account. There's a lot of desert out there. There's not that much rain. Moisture and mold is not that big of an issue. And number two, there's seismic issues there. So they don't build leaving the core of those blocks hollow. They actually fill it with concrete. So there's no water going in this way. So here he's invented this great thing for a climate that doesn't exist. So he says, okay, what do I do? I said, well, this concept's got to exist somewhere, right? So did a bunch of research, went out and discovered that in the southeast, there's plenty of rain in the southeast. Most of the economies in the southeast are challenged. Let's just say there's some of the poorer states and stuff are there. And so they're doing a lot of block construction for prisons, schools, government buildings, where the government has to spend, they're building with block because it's cheaper than the other alternatives. And they're not filling them with concrete. So all of a sudden we have a market. Well, here's the problem. That market was 1/10 the size of the predicted market on the West Coast. So lesson here is this. Infrastructure works both ways. You want to get ahead of it. You don't always want to be reactive to your infrastructure needs, but you need to do the full level of research. Business owners typically get an idea in their head, like he did, and assume, I know my stuff, I know my people, I know my clients, this is the next big thing. When you hit a certain level, do the research. Next. All right. Technology is its own thing. I'm going to be very quick about this. A lot of us use technology as a support piece, right? We store stuff on a computer. When we need it, we do that. And technology supports almost every business in existence. But I will tell you this. If you're on the cutting edge of technology, technology is constantly changing industries. It's changing niches. It is leading that. And if you're not paying attention to how technology is going to impact your industry and can lead your industry somewhere else, if you're not one of the people innovating with the technology and you're just following, you're going to fall behind. It moves too quickly. And I don't have a quick answer for that, But be aware, it can't just be the computer sitting on the desk over there, or I've got my stuff up in the cloud, right? You've got to know, how is technology going to impact this industry? What can I do? All right, next. Okay, market position. This one is a little bit interesting because what you saw with all the others is they're all internal facing. Most business owners, if you ask them about what is an issue for them, they're going to cite everything external. There's no labor out there. Labor markets are crazy. Inflation's up. Economy's not good. They're going to always be talking about the outside stuff, when generally it's the internal stuff that is truly their biggest hurdles, not the external. This one, however, is external. If you're not paying attention to your market position and what your market wants, if you're not looking at where things are going with that market, who are possible new consumers of your service or product, if you're not doing any of that, if you're just continuing to sell to the market the way you've always done, the external will become your issue. You will begin to be irrelevant. Trust me, even in small business, competition evolves. They're not paying as much attention as big business. They're not studying their competition, but people are paying attention. Why retail gets this a lot, right? Why all of a sudden are we no longer selling any of this? Because the store 2 doors down has a knockoff that's 50% of what you're charging, right? Go find out what's going on. Okay, so we need to be sampling our market position. We need to be sampling the outside world. We need to pay attention to those things, but we can't only pay attention. And that's why I list this one last, because owners want to pay attention and say, all of our issues are out there affecting us, not in here. And it's usually internal. Remember, all those stats you hear about, what the market's doing, the unemployment rate, all those things are macro stats. You're a micro business. I don't care if the unemployment rate's only 3.5% and we have a labor market thing. If you find the person to work for you, you're done. Those stats is no longer relevant. So we have to be careful that we don't keep looking outward and using that as a rationale for why things aren't going the way we want. But we still have to pay attention. Next. Okay, I had seen very quickly when you were checking the the chat, I think there was a comment about funds. Is that correct?
Yes. Henry said, please talk about access to cash.
Access to cash. Okay. All right. I'm going to answer this in 2 ways. The first way is this. This is our +1 inhibitor. It's called capacity. The reason that we don't use it as its own inhibitor is because it's present in everything, right? Capacity of the owner, founder's cap. Capacity of staff, jack of all trades. Capacity of your team to do what they need, personnel. Capacity of your infrastructure. Capacity is there everywhere. And capacity is also there for cash. And typically, owners will say, the only thing stopping me is access to cash. Okay, no, it's not. Access to cash comes with doing those other things right. Okay? We see, right now there's a huge push around startups, for one, right? And there's money for startups. And part of the reason for that is, we saw with the Great Resignation and with COVID and all those other things, last year we had the highest level of startup businesses in this country for 25 years. Okay, of folks saying, I'm doing it. I'm going to go for it, right? And so there is a desire by economic development and everybody else out there to see these things succeed, to provide some funding. Now that's not meant to say, we all know when we get stuck in a place where we've built to a certain level and none of the mechanisms that are easily accessible out there are accessible to us, and we do get in a cash crunch. That's absolutely true. And I will point out that when you're up at that churn point means that you're probably already used up a lot of your resources, including cash. And so there has got to be some creative things, and there are creative things out there. Okay, it does exist. It can be difficult. I will say this, we don't have time to go into it at that level, because I want to tell you this story. I want to tell you how capacity and lack of capacity actually impacts your business and you're completely unaware of it. So let's pretend like we are all, as a whole big group, we're at Ocean City. We're out on the beach. We're having a great time. We're throwing frisbees. I can't because my shoulder's messed up, but you guys are throwing frisbees. You're having a blast. All of a sudden we go, hey, we're hungry. All right, we're hungry. What are we going to do? So we say, let's go to Dough Rollers, get some pizzas. Let's go. So we go up onto the boardwalk. We go up to Dough Rollers, and there are 2 lines coming out of the Dough Rollers door. And those lines are going down about 4 blocks. And we're like, what the hell, right? So we're like, we're not getting pizza. I mean, nobody's standing in that line. We're not getting pizza. Let's go to Bull on the Beach, right? So we leave. Now, what that shows you is that that restaurant does not have the capacity for its demand. It's easy for us to see that because there's 2 lines coming out the door. Now, in your business, there may not be lines coming out. There may not be reservations. There may not be those things. But when your capacity is up, people know that. It's demonstrated. It can be demonstrated because you can't get back to people fast enough. You're not responding the way you did. Your service has started to drop. You're making errors. People are surly because they're so pressured. I'm not sure how it's showing itself, but it's showing itself. So you may do all kinds of things thinking, I've got to get more business. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it doesn't come. Some of that is probably there because the market senses they can't handle my business. I've had that happen to me. I've had a client say to me, last time I was at a networking event, you were talking about how busy you were and how you were trying to hire to get caught up on that. So I didn't come to you. I didn't know, I'm a new client, so without knowing it, I was sending out that signal, right? My capacity is full, right? So you need to be aware that capacity is sometimes invisible. Sometimes but sometimes it's an invisible inhibitor that you're totally unaware is affecting you. Okay? Last slide, I believe. Maybe. It's always that possibility. Okay. So let's go back around to that concept I said about the gentleman who was selling, and he was super perseverant, right? He's just going after it. And we see that whole type of behavior with small business owners. Here's what happens a lot with the small business owner. Small business owner has an expertise and a focus of how they approach their business. When I say how they approach their business, I don't mean their specific knowledge that they need to do what the business does. I mean what they're comfortable with in business. So some people are comfortable managing people. Some people are comfortable with the finances. Some people are comfortable with marketing, but they're not comfortable with all areas, okay? And I found this when I was in the veterinary industry, is that veterinarians are trained to be doctors. They're not trained to be business people. Then they get released into the world, okay, and they go and they own a clinic, and they have no idea how to run that clinic. They have no business sense at all. So that happens here, where let's pick an owner and let's just say marketing. This owner is very comfortable with marketing, right? So every time there's a slowdown in business, they put out some advertisements, right? They market, they come up with a special, they go out, they network, they make it happen, they market. And then when things really go south, like they got competition, they're really struggling, they go, we're rebranding. We're going to rebrand, we're going to approach this differently, we're going to get in there, right? So they're constantly working with the concept of marketing. That's the frame they look through. If you notice up there, you see I've got there an 80% and 20%, and these are just illustrative. So if the bubble's this big and the owner is actually comfortable with and pretty good at that expertise area, then they're starting to maximize what they can do by going back to that marketing bucket, right? They're tinkering around the edges. They're pretty good at marketing. Okay, how many times are you going to rebrand and have it actually do something? How many times, let's change our logo? I mean, if we're good and comfortable, we're actually utilizing what that's going to get us pretty well. Next slide. Typically, there's a blind spot in that organization. That owner is avoiding some part because they either don't like it, they don't understand it, or they don't see the value in it. And imagine if somebody, going back to that expertise, with that expertise came in and said, look how focusing on this neglected area of your business, or neglected areas of your business, look what could be done, as opposed to you taking all of your funds, and all your approach and going back to the well that you go to every single time. Make sense? Okay. Folks, that is our abbreviated presentation of the Great Small Business Plateau. Any questions?
What is your thought on hiring a business manager?
I think that is a great move. I think hiring a business manager is going to provide expertise that can be helpful. But I will say this to you. In any hiring decision, there's not a magic hire. So what you want to look at is you want to look at what is the thing that's going to have the most impact positively on my business. So sometimes folks look at it and they say, I need 3 positions. And I say, okay, which one is going to help you generate enough funds to pay for those 3? So the first one should pay for themselves before you hire the second one for the third one. So, a business manager, and I would say conceptually that's great, but is that an operations manager? Is that an office manager? You have to define what that is. And is that just another cost that's going to make you more efficient? Or is the person you're hiring going to do efficiencies that actually help with revenue or profit or something along those lines? So make sure that hire is going to impact in a way that pays for itself. Other questions?
Yeah, feel free to unmute if you're virtual and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are some recommendations that you would give if someone is in the phase of succession planning in their business? And let's just say we're looking at the window of 5 years.
Okay.
So what is the initial framework of things that we should be looking at? Some of the research we should be doing, this isn't the word to use, but it's what I can think of, like the window dressing, so to speak, of like what's the actual initial footprint,
Okay.
or something like that.
Okay. So there's a couple of things that you look at right out of the gate. And one of those is, what do you think so if you're selling the business, what do you think your market is?
Well, it's not necessarily selling.
Okay.
We're just trying to figure out the options, because it doesn't mean that selling is the.
No, it doesn't mean that. So here's what I typically will do. We'll look at, is there a potential buyer? And if so, what does that look like? Meaning, is that another competitor? Is that just putting it out on the market, and because your numbers look so good, those folks who are just buying businesses might buy you? And then the one that happens typically the most is there anybody already in the business who should buy that out, and what does that look like? Okay, because key personnel, a lot of small businesses end up with the wealth trapped in the owner's retirement because nobody sees value in that business. The owner's too embedded, they're too valuable, they're essential. So if you can't buy the owner, we're not buying the business. If you have a business like that, pulling in a key personnel, training them up, and getting them to where that owner can fade into the sunset, and now you have somebody else who assumes the mantle, that can work. So determining, first of all, what is the outcome you want, right? And then what are the best options for that outcome, okay? And then the additional piece to that to think about is the folks who are leaving. Is it an immediate buyout? Is it like, here's the money, they're gone? Or is it a business finance buyout where the business is turned over to this person as long as the person exiting gets for 10 years or 5 years, whatever it is, a consulting, and they're getting paid from the profits of the business. So it's almost self-funded, right? It's almost like the business is funding the succession itself versus a bank loan or somebody coming up with cash. Okay. The other piece I would say is 5 years is a good window, because here's typically what happens if you're looking at sale. Things start to change. A lot of times with businesses, our focus is on avoiding taxes, doing things that make sense there. As soon as we're getting ready to sell, we have a slightly different perspective. We want the business to be robust. We want to show what we've done. And so books being restated, if you brought a broker in, they would come in and they'd say, okay, we're going to pull out these costs here because that's really associated with the owner. They're going to do certain things to restate the books in a way that make it the most opportune for somebody to want to buy. So what I would say to you is, from a research standpoint, whether you're going to use a broker or not, having somebody with that expertise come in, look at your books and say, here are the things I would start to do. So you have years of a pattern before you actually put it on the market or try to do that. right? A lot of folks go, I'm ready to sell this year. Okay, you are nowhere ready to sell this year if you want an optimal thing.
Window dressing.
Yes. So there are people out there who know how to do that in various
Yeah.
different, yeah, there doesn't have to be a broker, it can be CPA, it can be a financial advisor, it can be, there's folks who have played with this game. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
What else? Anything? Okay.
I actually have a question, and it's general in nature. Adam Pohl here with the Chamber. I find that a lot of businesses, you talked about that slingshot effect, where obviously now your financial disposition or just portfolio, things just change. And a lot of people have that skill or that idea, that thing that has brought them that money. But the reality is the marketing aspect of it is tough. How do you adjust your marketing? So do you think that as businesses grow out of their initial model, they should adapt to a percentage of their income, what they're bringing and going towards outbound marketing, or should it be more idea based?
That's a great question, and that is not, there's not an easy answer to that, because I will tell you that there are certain businesses that need to do that guerrilla marketing, right? That they need to have those ideas. They're in niches, so that it's not about competition, it's about getting known. And there are some that their revenues fluctuate so much that I don't know that a percentage of revenue fits. But then there are some, I have a few businesses right now that, they're big data analysts, and it really is just a percentage of revenue. Like, here's the path, here's who you talk to, here's what you need to do, and you just need to maintain that percentage to make sure that your revenue is going where it needs to go. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I will say this, for most small business, and this could be an entirely another talk, most small businesses make the mistake of not understanding the difference between advertising, marketing, and branding. And they end up doing a whole lot of advertising, which is not necessarily a good use of their funds. And they look at marketing as getting out there. And I don't mean any disrespect to the chambers, but that means they just start walking around talking to people and networking, and there isn't a plan. The biggest impact a small business owner can have to be noticed in a crowded market. I mean, think about it. You're a tiny business, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're everywhere online. So everyone's jumping on social media, doing this, doing that. You're a tiny little fish in a giant school in a massive ocean. The best way to get noticed is authentic brand. And when I say authentic, that word is important. It's not say what you think your people want to hear. It's be authentic to the purpose, why you are what you are, what makes you do what you do. Because it's different than what makes your competitor who does the same thing do it. It's different than the person next door. And if you can put that out there, people who value that will opt in, because you're talking their language. And people who aren't interested in your values and your authenticity, they'll go away. Too often, small business owners cast a big wide net because they think any dollar out there is one they should get. And in reality, they need to thread the eye of a needle and get the people who are going to be happy with their service, because it is based on what they care about. So if you put that out there successfully, it's like that little fish in that big school has a red stripe across its side, and everybody can see that fish, even though there's a million fish there. That's a crazy and bad analogy, but I said it.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, do we have any other questions real quick? I know we went over, but we started a little late, so that's okay. Any final questions? Okay, well, if not, we can close up here. I just want to thank Patrick and the whole team at Chesapeake Think Tank for all they do for the Chamber and providing us with such great and helpful information today. I know I personally took a lot of notes on things to work on, so thank you. And for all of our guests, we'll share a link to the video of this session a little later today, along with contact information for Patrick and the attendee contact information from the presentation. So we hope you'll all tune in for future webinars and other events. Our schedule can be found at the Chamber's website, which is centralmarylandchamber.org. Thanks again to Patrick for such a great presentation, and we hope to see all of you very soon. Have a great day.